Особо нам показалось важным подтвердить нашу позицию по ситуации в Венесуэле. Мы едины в необходимости скорейшего преодоления имеющихся разногласий в этой стране исключительно мирным путем, через общенациональный диалог, без какого-либо давления извне, не говоря уже о неприемлемости угроз военного вмешательства во внутренние дела этой страны.
The United States and Japan have begun a joint military exercise in Hokkaido that's described as the largest ever of its kind. The operation is taking place in the northern Japanese city of Eniwa. Senior commanders say it's aimed at strengthening their alliance and not related to tension on the Korean peninsula.
The Japanese-U.S. alliance is extremely important to stability in the Asia-Pacific region. So the better we are, the better we can communicate with our partners and allies, the better stability will be throughout.
The 18-day exercise called Northern Viper involves some 3,500 troops and includes rocket artillery drills and live-fire operations.
The United States places great importance on the ongoing diplomatic isolation of the Kim regime. And we strongly urge Chile today, and we urge Brazil, Mexico, and Peru to break all diplomatic and commercial ties to North Korea. We truly believe that it's imperative that the regime in Pyongyang understand that all options are on the table. The United States of America will simply not permit a rogue regime in North Korea to possess usable nuclear weapons that can reach the continental United States and threaten our people.
Trump has vowed to crack down on China, and now he's taking action, directing his top trade advisor, Robert Lighthizer, to look into China's intellectual property practices. Lighthizer will focus on Chinese practices that force U.S. firms operating in China to turn over proprietary technological secrets.
I expect one reason President Trump picked him is because he's expecting he'll be very tough on the Chinese and that he will investigate and come up with recommendations that may include some protectionist measures.
Lighthizer will launch a so-called Section 301 investigation under the 1974 Trade Act. This allows the president to unilaterally impose tariffs or other trade restrictions to protect U.S. industries from unfair trade practices of foreign countries. Section 301 was a popular trade tool in the 1980s to combat Japanese imports of motorcycles, steel, and other products, but has been rarely used since the creation of the World Trade Organization in 1995.
The World Trade Organization provides a more robust authority to enforce trade sanctions in the case of unfair trade practices such as dumping. But the problem is that Trump doesn't trust the WTO, just like he doesn't trust a lot of multilateral organizations. He doesn't trust them to be an effective instrument for redress of grievances. So he's trying to resuscitate the Section 301 to go back to the idea of national power as the main way to redress expected abuses or suspected abuses abroad.
The investigation could result in steep tariffs on Chinese goods or impose sanctions, igniting fears that it could cause the international trade system to unravel or result.
Independent defense and security think tank, very well regarded, and they've written this report which is urging civil servants to start preparing right away for the possible declaration of war between the US and North Korea. Here's the essence of what the report says.
A new Korean war is now a real possibility. If war did begin, the president would be on the phone to 10 Downing Street within an hour asking for support. Whitehall needs to be preparing now for a range of possible scenarios. that could unfold in the coming months.
What led RUSI to produce this report was the opinion of its author that says that North Korean technical advances combined with what it calls the volatile and impulsive personality of President Trump are a dangerous combination. Although experts say that a North Korean missile could potentially reach London, there isn't really a palpable sense of panic here in the media or on the street, but that is in direct contrast to what we're seeing elsewhere. In the US, we're hearing from companies that make bomb shelters. They say that they're seeing an uptick in the number of orders, particularly from Japan, but also domestically in the US, where families are burying bomb shelters in their garden in preparation for what could be a nuclear attack. Meanwhile, in the US territory of Guam, which of course has been the target of the recent aggressive rhetoric from North Korea, they had a terrible shock overnight when radio stations accidentally broadcast an emergency warning. Residents took to Facebook to express their panic.
Testing the emergency alert system on the day that we were expecting missiles to be launched our way is a perfect way to cause mass hysteria.
Why would you test a civil danger warning on the day we're expecting to get bombed and not indicate that it's a test? This is freaking me out.
Back here in London, though, RUSI is warning that if the worst did happen, the Prime Minister would have a maximum of a few hours to decide what her position would be on that and what kind of support she can offer. And that is of particular worry, as of course many senior civil servants are seconded to a matter much closer to home, Brexit, when in fact the threat could come from further away.
Jason and Joseph practice clearing a building. Every month, the members of this militia get together to train in Georgia, in the southern United States, preparing to ward off enemies, both foreign and domestic.
I'm prepared for civil war, civil unrest, EMP attack from North Korea, Russia, invasion from a foreign government, my own government turning its guns against the people in an effort to disarm. What the Corps done to me.
Over the weekend, the 20 or so members of the Georgia Security Force will go through physical training and combat simulations. The majority of members in militias like this one are white Americans from conservative, lower middle class backgrounds.
I'm learning skills that most people pay to learn. And I'm out here having fun with friends. I'm surrounded by like minds. I don't get laughed at for wanting to pray before a meal. It's our culture, American culture.
The leader of this militia says he carefully selects his recruits to avoid any radical elements. But in the past, some groups have served as breeding grounds for criminal and terrorist acts.
It's definitely sort of part of American culture, the gun-bearing thing. But they're a threat, most definitely. I mean, if you have groups of civilians who are arming themselves in military fashion, in some form or fashion, creating military structures in their organizations, collecting and storing arms, ammunition, that's a threat.
The militia see themselves as heirs to the American Revolution, with a patriotic duty to protect constitutional rights. They regularly attend demonstrations with their weapons, claiming to provide security. But they're considered extremist groups by the FBI and many other organizations who point to many militias' open embrace of hate speech. The Georgia Security Force is known for its anti-Islamic rhetoric.
The ideology is manipulating a whole mindset of people to go to bring in a mental illness, in my opinion, into civilized culture and expect them to commingle. That's not going to happen.
This is just one of 14 anti-government militias in Georgia and around 165 across the United States. The number of groups has risen in the past couple of years, but is down from a peak of more than 300 in 2010. Militia activity tends to fall off under Republican presidents. So with Donald Trump in the White House, these groups could see their membership drop.
Crisis with Russia warning against further sanctions on the rogue nation as China calls on the U.S. and North Korea to calm the angry rhetoric after Kim Jong-un delayed, for now, a proposed attack on the U.S. territory of Guam. President Trump tweeting today, Kim Jong-un of North Korea made a very wise and well-reasoned decision. The alternative would have been both catastrophic and unacceptable. Joining us now, Claudia Rosette. She's a foreign policy fellow at the Women's Independent Forum. Thank you very much for joining us.
Great to be here.
Claudia, I'll ask you to begin with. Did the United States do the right thing in threatening North Korea?
Oh, yes, they would definitely. Look, doomsday for now has been canceled. I hope it genuinely scared Kim Jong-un. It was very unlikely that North Korea was really going to strike Guam, but we couldn't rule it out. And we had to do something. So to threaten the overwhelming use of military force, that was absolutely called for.
So was it the strong rhetoric from President Trump, or were it the sanctions imposed from China that made the difference with North Korea?
Actually, it might have been neither, okay? It was important that President Trump responded by saying, we will use military force if you strike us. And the sanctions might be helping. But I think what we've really just seen is that Kim Jong-un has shown us he can dial up doomsday, and then we will all sigh with relief that it's been canceled. But P.S., remember, just last month, North Korea tested 2 intercontinental ballistic missiles. That's what it's now got in its arsenal. We're all focused on, hey, they backed off on Guam. That threat didn't exist until a week before. That's North Korea's classic shakedown racket, and we should expect more crises to come.
But the difference is this is a different administration, and they're clearly being much more forceful. So what if they do follow through eventually and launch another missile towards Guam?
Well, they haven't actually launched one right now at Guam, but if they test another one of these missiles, look, there's been an argument for some time that we should just shoot these missiles on launch, that we should shoot them down, that we should do something to stop them. I think there's a great deal to be said for that. We have got to do more in the end than words, and I don't have any great faith in the sanctions. China right now is making a great display of how it's now enforcing sanctions. China has signed on to every sanctions resolution since 2006 at the UN, 7 of them. Doesn't enforce them. No. Exactly.
Especially
the problem is, precisely, these tend to erode. So what are we looking at? Something needs to convince Kim Jong-un that this really just won't stand. He can't be Dr. Doomsday. That's too dangerous for us, for the world. I actually think the only real solution is his regime has to go. The question is there a way to is there a way to do it without a hot war?
Yeah, we've said that the regime change is not our goal. Claudia, we had a lot of breaking news, so we have to wrap you up.
Senior officers, the dictator reportedly declared that the U.S. should halt its, quote, arrogant provocations. Is it possible to get rid of North Korea's nukes without actually invading the country? Joining me now to discuss is the former United States ambassador to the UN, Fox News contributor, and my sometimes sparring partner and dear friend, Ambassador John Bolton. Ambassador, to that question, is it realistic that we could rid them of their nuclear weapons without an actual invasion of the country?
Well, I think there are 2 aspects to that. Number one, I do think there's a diplomatic strategy still available to us. I don't think that has anything to do with trying to persuade the North Korean leadership to give up its nuclear weapons, because I don't think that's possible. Instead, I think looking at China and making a careful argument to them that it's in China's national interest to reunite the 2 Koreas, I think there's a path there. It's hard, it's complicated. I wish we'd started 15 years ago, but I think there's a realistic chance of doing it. That would be my preferred outcome.
Isn't he utterly, I'm talking about the dictator of North Korea, cash-starved? And won't he do almost anything for cash, like maybe sell nuclear weapons to some radical terrorist organization, or maybe even sell them to the Chinese and get rid of them?
Well, or sell them to Iran. I mean, you've put your finger on an important point here when we talk about sanctioning North Korea. Honestly, it's a desperately poor country. There's very little more we can do to it to that effect. And remember that its partner in crime here in Iran has been enriched to the tune of $150 billion or so of unfrozen assets and uncounted more billions in deals now that the sanctions on them have been lifted. I think there's a lot of collusion between Iran and North Korea. I think it's in both their interests to keep each other happy, and I think no matter what China or Russia do on the sanctions, Iran's there to help the North Koreans out.
Does the Trump administration, as articulated in yesterday's Wall Street Journal in an interesting piece by Secretary of Defense Mattis and Secretary of State Tillerson, have a better handle on this than the Obama administration, or is it same old when it comes to Kim Jong-un?
Well, very sadly, it's same old, and what is stunning about it is that just a few days before, Obama National Security Advisor Susan Rice had written a kind of confessional, which she expanded on in several TV interviews, acknowledging that this effort through carrots and sticks, incentives and disincentives, to persuade North Korea to give up its nuclear program over the last 25 years had failed. Now, her solution is accept a nuclear North Korea, which I, for one, am not prepared to do. Mattis and Tillerson say they want North Korea denuclearized, but they're proposing to pursue essentially the same approach that's failed over the past 25 years, and it will fail in year 26, too.
Okay, I want to segue into Iran with you, Ambassador Bolton, but the question is similar. Is nuclear weapons in the hands of bad regimes, regimes that wish us ill, ultimately inevitable? Can't any of them, like Pakistan did, get or acquire or bribe a scientist to give them the wherewithal to develop nuclear weaponry?
Look, that route is there, and I would say this. Each new country that gets a nuclear weapons capability inspires others to do the same. That's what the problem with proliferation is, in my view, why stopping North Korea and Iran is so important. But I tell you, even if I were to concede the point that it's like trying to sweep back the sea and that the spread of nuclear weapons is inevitable, the danger, the risk they pose is so enormous. Give me the broom. I'll sweep until I drop.
All right, John, the folks in Iran say that they can restart their nuclear program in a matter of hours. Is that true? And if it is, of what effect was the agreement that President Obama entered into with them a year and a half ago?
Well said. Look, to get this deal, the Iranians made temporary, easily reversible concessions on their nuclear program. They got enormous front-end loaded tangible benefits. And what they're saying, in effect, is you signed a rotten deal. Don't push us because we can reactivate everything we've given up in a heartbeat. And they're essentially correct.
Before I let you go, are we on the verge of military intervention in Venezuela? And would you argue in favor of that?
No, I don't know what a military option in Venezuela is. I will say this. This is more than simply the collapse of a civilized government, a civil society. You've got the Iranians in there because Venezuela has the world's second largest reserves of uranium outside of Canada. The Russians are in there. The Cubans are all over the place. The collapse of Venezuela is a threat to international peace and security. I think we need to help the opposition. They're in disarray. And that poses a threat around the hemisphere. I don't see a military option involved here that I understand anyway.